My name is Emma Agnieszewski, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of Industry Intelligence and Initiatives at the Good Food Institute. And for those of you who may be new to the work of the Good Food Institute, or GFI as we're called, we are an international nonprofit that is developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. We identify the most effective solutions, we mobilize resources and talent, and we empower partners across the food system to make alternative proteins accessible, affordable, and delicious. Welcome to GFI's monthly Business of Alt Protein seminar. Today, we're going to be focusing on how insights from sensory studies can help improve the taste of plant-based meat products. Now, before we kick off the presentation, I have a few housekeeping announcements. One, the seminar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. We will also email everyone who's registered for today's webinar a copy of the recording and also a copy of the slide deck. Throughout the presentation, please do ask questions in the Q&A box. Please do it in the Q&A box rather than in the chat function. This helps us keep track of them more easily and create a queue for our Q&A session at the end. We may respond to some questions in writing throughout the seminar, and we'll also have time at the end for time to address your questions in a dedicated Q&A time slot. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Caroline Cotto is a director at Food System Innovations, where she leads Nectar, which is an initiative accelerating the protein transition with taste. And prior to FSI, Caroline co-founded Renewal Mill, an award-winning upcycled food startup. She served as the inaugural board president of the Upcycled Food Association, the world's first trade association for upcycled brands. She also regularly advises and mentors food, tech, and circular economy startups. Today, Caroline will share key takeaways from Nectar's inaugural publication, Taste of the Industry 2024, which is a large-scale sensory analysis of plant-based meat. I'll now pass it over to Caroline.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emma. It's exciting to be here today. So as Emma mentioned, we have about an hour together, and today we're going to introduce Nectar, our initiative, and then explore some of the key takeaways from our inaugural report. We're then going to show you how you can use this data for your own work. And finally, we're going to save some time at the end for Q&A. So as Emma mentioned again, please be sure to put your questions into the Q&A function throughout the call. And the last thing I'll note is that we'll also be using the polls function. So you should notice some polls coming up throughout the presentation. We'd love you to participate if you're able to. So at a high level, we have three main goals for this webinar. First, as I said, we want to share Nectar's value proposition and why we think now is the time for this type of organization to exist. Secondly, we want to teach you how to interpret and utilize the sensory data from our report so that you can use it in your own work. And third, we hope that you'll put what you learn here today into practice. So regardless of your role in the alternative protein space, we hope that you leave with at least one clear call to action. Thanks, Emma, for that generous introduction. As Emma mentioned again, I come from a startup background, and this is my first foray to turning my full attention to the alternative protein space. So I joined FSI in May. And for those of you who are not familiar, Food System Innovations is a philanthropic impact platform that runs a variety of programmatic initiatives to accelerate the alternative protein transition. One of the programmatic initiatives is what we're calling Nectar, and Nectar's mission is to accelerate the protein transition with taste. So essentially, there's been an influx of plant-based products to the market over the last few years, but there's been no objective way to evaluate the sensory performance of these products. And because we know taste is a primary driver of consumer purchasing, understanding taste is critically important to the success of this industry. So Nectar exists to bring an objective evidence base to taste. And we're doing this through three operational pillars, which are learn, support, and celebrate. So we're learning by conducting large-scale blind sensory panels of alternative protein products, starting with plant-based meat, but we hope to expand to other categories in the future. We're then operationalizing this data to help brands and manufacturers accelerate their own product development. And lastly, we plan to use this data to celebrate great tasting products and drive broader market adoption. And we think that there's a need for Nectar's work at this particular moment for two main reasons. First, we're seeing weakening market demand for plant-based products, and I'm sure many of you have read GFI's State of the Industry report for 2023, which showed a 19% decrease in the unit sales of plant-based meats for last year. But also, we feel that the industry is bogged down by challenging cultural and media narratives that have never been stronger. And we all know here that reducing global meat consumption is absolutely imperative to improving planetary and public health. And we also know that data can be really decisive, which is why we believe that Nectar's data can tell a more informed story about plant-based meat, while also identifying clear areas for opportunity and specific pathways for product improvement. Just a brief history of how we got here. David Meyer is the founder of Food System Innovations, and he started this sensory work back in 2019 when he conducted the first blind tasting panel of plant-based meats. And the results showed that of the products tested, almost none of the plant-based burgers and chicken products rated equivalently to animal-based benchmarks on taste. Then last summer, in late 2023, FSI conducted another sensory panel that was much larger, and this is the sensory panel data that makes up the inaugural Taste of the Industry report that we're going to be talking about today. We've published those results in June, along with the formal launch of the Nectar Initiative. And moving forward, we plan to release an annual Taste of the Industry report, as well as more intermittent future of the industry reports that will focus on more sort of nascent alternative protein categories that are still in early development. So our first Future of the Industry report, which is due out next month, is going to look at blended, or what we're calling plant-rich meat products. And we're going to be recruiting this fall for plant-based products for our next Taste of the Industry report. So we'll be conducting those sensory panels in late 2024 and hoping to publish the results next spring. Also on the horizon, we are planning to use the results of our sensory testing to celebrate great tasting products, as I mentioned. So in the spring of 2025, we're going to be launching the Nectar Awards and creating a credential that top performing brands can use to both market and sell their products. So unlike existing awards in the food industry, we're going to be using our data to identify top performers instead of a panel of judges to bring that objective third-party verification. And stay tuned for more information on that. But for the remainder of our time today, we're going to do a deep dive on Nectar's inaugural body of work, Taste of the Industry 2024. So for some context setting, Taste of the Industry 2024 is the largest publicly available sensory analysis of plant-based meats. And we tested 45 plant-based meat products across 5 categories with 1,150 omnivores in Chicago. This was a central location test, so we brought all of the participants to the same location, and products were chosen based on what was available in retail in the Chicagoland area at the time of testing. And then we used a diverse panel of omnivores that was split evenly across gender, income, and age. So here's some additional information on the demographics. In order to be included, participants had to be omnivores, meaning that they consumed animal protein with relative frequency. And in terms of methodology, we conducted a quantitative monadic blind taste test, and products were served naked, so without any additional salt or seasoning, and just the product on a plate. Each product was tested by at least 100 omnivores. And just to orient you to some of the terminology used in this report, we tested mainly plant-based products with a few notable exceptions in the burger category, where we tested some blended products. In each category, we determined the plant-based leader, or the product with the highest overall liking score, as well as the plant-based average, which is the average liking score across all of the products tested in that category. And then lastly, for each category, we also tested an animal-based benchmark. So we're going to spend the next part of our time together walking through 5 main takeaways from our report. And as we walk through these 5 key findings, we're going to make it a little bit more interactive by getting you all to answer some polls. So here's our first question is, which plant-based category had the lowest average liking score? We'll give you a minute just to put your answers in. Okay, so it looks like people thought it was bacon, and the actual answer is hot dogs. So congrats to everybody that guessed hot dogs, but if you look at the bottom of your screen here, you see these average liking scores. And for all of the 5 categories, we can see that hot dog is the farthest behind with a liking score of 2.5. So I will note that this test was conducted before some of the hot dog products hit the market, namely the Impossible hot dog was not out yet when this test was conducted. So we're curious to see how these results will change in 2025. But what you're also going to notice here is that across all categories, most of the liking scores, or sorry, all of the liking scores are definitely below 5, which is like somewhat, and most of them are closer to 3, which is dislike somewhat, which leads us to our first big takeaway from the report, and that is that consumers do not yet like the average plant-based product. And this is a bit sobering, but really underscores for us the reason why Nectar's work is necessary so that we can bring up these weak category averages. One other interesting aside from this takeaway is that while most plant-based products are not quite ready for mainstream adoption, breaded products tended to outperform unbreaded ones, which is why we see higher liking scores for chicken nuggets and tenders in this report, and why these products tend to be sort of the gateway products for achieving broader market adoption. Okay, so already time for another poll. Which category do you think had the biggest gap in liking between the leading and the average plant-based product? We'll give you a few minutes here. Oh, interesting. So people here thought burgers, and let's see, the answer is actually bacon. So congrats to all of you who guessed bacon. So again, if you take a look here at the bottom of the screen, you'll see these average liking scores. And you can see that the gap is clearly visible here in the baking category with the plant-based leader product, which in this case happens to be Hooray Bacon, a brand that was shut down shortly after this test. But you can see that leader product outperforming the average plant-based bacon. And again, if we look more closely across all 5 categories, we see a very similar story. So in most of the categories, the plant-based leader is far outperforming the plant-based average, with, again, hot dogs being that notable exception across all of our testing. And that leads us to our second big takeaway from the report, which is that improvement is feasible with further R&D. So the fact that we see these leader products winning means that the investment these companies have made into R&D is really worthwhile and paying off from a consumer perception perspective. Okay, you guys have been great at these, so we have another poll. What % of participants rated the animal bacon as like very much? And for a hint here, the leading plant-based bacon was rated like very much by only 10% of participants. Okay, congrats. Yeah, so everybody got this one exactly right. The answer was 32%. So you can see here the difference in liking between the animal-based benchmark and the leading plant-based product. And animal bacon was liked very much by 32% of participants compared to the 10% that rated the plant-based leader as like very much. If we zoom out a little bit more, we see, so I guess going back here, this is, obviously we would love to see more folks rating the leading product as like very much. But if we zoom out and look at the liking scores, we see a bit more hopeful of a story, which is that the best plant-based products are actually approaching parity with animal products when it comes to liking scores. So you can see that in the fact that these dots, the orange and the brown dots, are quite close together. Again, hot dogs being a notable exception. But in fact, in one category, which is chicken nuggets, the leading plant-based product had a higher liking score than the animal-based benchmark. So you see that here with the 4.9 overtaking this 4.3 score. And we even see that the average plant-based nugget has achieved parity with the animal-based nugget when it comes to liking. So both of those scored 4.3, which leads us to our third main takeaway from the report, that overall the leading plant-based nuggets outperformed animal-based nuggets across the board, and the average plant-based nugget has achieved taste parity with the animal-based nugget. So this was one of the most exciting findings from our report, and headlined much of the press coverage that in blind tastings, consumers actually prefer plant-based nuggets over chicken nuggets, which is really cool to see how far the industry has come in that regard. Another interesting output from the report was that we were able to map how consumers felt about a wide range of sensory attributes across all 5 categories. So if you just look at this with a first glance, you'll see from the heat map that there's a whole lot of orange and not a lot of blue, which means that consumers rated all of the attributes across all 5 categories as not enough versus just about right or too much. Or said differently, our fourth big takeaway is that consumers are really demanding bolder profiles from plant-based products. So they want plant-based products to be meatier, saltier, smokier, sweeter, juicier, firmer, etc. So basically what this means for brands and product developers is that you guys should not be afraid to dial things up, and that consumers would really appreciate that bolder flavor profile. And then I mentioned when we were going through the definitions that we did test a few blended products in the burger category. And what we found was that the blended leader, which is seen here in blue, actually outperformed the plant-based leader product in orange. So this was in the burger category, the only product that performed within a 1-point liking score of the animal-based benchmark, and was higher than neither like nor dislike, was a blended burger product. And that led us to our final big takeaway from the report, which is that blended products, or what we're calling plant-rich meats, this is a term that Food System Innovations has been testing with consumers and has found to resonate. So we're kind of trying to make that transition ourselves from blended to plant-rich meats, but plant-rich meats present an untapped taste opportunity. So similar to the way that hybrid vehicles were kind of a gateway to consumer adoption for fully electric vehicles, we believe that plant-rich meat shows potential as a gateway for converting omnivores to more fully 100% plant-based options. And that's why we decided to do our second report at Nectar on plant-rich meats. So as I mentioned, this report is going to be published in September, on September 24th, and will be the largest publicly available sensory analysis of plant-rich meats. So it looks at 9 categories of blended products and explores the taste potential of this emerging category. So stay tuned for that report next month. There's definitely a lot of a lot of juicy nuggets in that. Okay, so we just walked through these 5 takeaways. So I want to spend the rest of our time together briefly showing you how to utilize the Taste of the Industry report for your own needs, and then we will turn it over to Q&A. So make sure you're putting those questions in the Q&A function. And to do this, I've chosen to look specifically at the bacon section, but every category deep dive, which you can find on the Nectar website, has these same elements. So if you are a burger company, you can find the burger deep dive, and so on and so on. So each section starts with an executive summary that outlines the top sensory opportunities and the priority attributes to focus on from an R&D perspective. And then you'll see a snapshot of liking scores across a number of different attributes. So here, for example, we're seeing flavor and then texture and appearance. And if you look at the average liking scores on the bottom of this screen, you can kind of see them moving back and forth. And this is a really easy way to derive insights. So if we look here, we can see that the biggest opportunity for the average plant-based product here in yellow to catch up to the plant-based leader is by improving its texture. And then if we look at appearance, we can see that the biggest opportunity for the plant-based leader bacon to catch up to the animal-based bacon is by improving its appearance. So each of this, and we've tried to outline all of those takeaways for you in each section as well. And then we also asked the testing omnivores a number of jar questions, or just about right. So in this report, you'll see we asked people if they felt the product was too sweet, not sweet enough, or just about right. And we have these for things like meatiness, juiciness, firmness, essentially everything you saw on that heat map that I showed. So a lot of detail that you can really look into and see where people think these products are performing well, and where some additional R&D is needed. And then for each category, we also conducted penalty analyses to understand which sensory traits most negatively affected consumers' liking of the product. So the way to read these graphs is you really want to focus on attributes in the upper right-hand quadrant, so highlighted here in this orange square. So these are the attributes with the highest prevalence, meaning lots of the respondents mentioned them, and the highest impact, meaning they significantly decreased consumers' overall liking of the product. So for bacon, we're seeing that the attributes in the upper right quadrant that deserve the most R&D attention because of high prevalence are that the products were not meaty enough and were too mild, and that the attributes with the highest negative impact on liking were actually textural attributes. So things like not crispy enough and too mushy, chewy, rubbery. And again, we have these for each of the categories tested. So it's really easy to see if you're going to be releasing a new product in a category, what you need to do in order to win over the majority of consumers. So that was just a small taste of the data available in the full 140-page report, which you can access at nectar.org. And that will also be sending out via email after today's call. So definitely lots more to dig into there. I just briefly wanted to mention that we're going to be making some changes for the Taste of the Industry 2025 report. So instead of doing a central location test, we're actually going to be doing in-context testing in restaurant settings. So we actually bring the omnivore consumers to a restaurant and they experience the product in a natural presentation. So for things like burgers, this would be eating a burger in a bun, and they're able to apply condiments to the burger as long as they do it equally across samples. So really just trying to give them that natural, authentic experience that will allow them to give the most organic, authentic feedback. We're also going to be testing more categories. So we hope to expand up to 15 categories, and these will be chosen by looking at the top categories of meat sold in the US and then trying to map plant-based categories to those animal-based categories. We'll also be publishing the name of the animal-based benchmark that was used for each category, which we were not able to do in this first report. And then from a statistics and question asking perspective, we're going to be using check all that apply questions, or CATA questions, that allow us to get a little bit more directional insight for product developers. So it'll look similar to the penalty analysis that I just showed you, but you can really pinpoint which sensory attributes are driving liking for consumers through these CATA analyses. And lastly, we're including more go-to-market questions that can inform marketing and sales strategies for brands. So for the plant-rich meat study, we asked a lot about nomenclature, like what do people think the category should be called? And then also some questions around purchase intent that will be coming out soon. And finally, we're about to head into Q&A here. So again, get your questions ready and add them to the Q&A box if you haven't already. But I just want to end by spending a moment on how you can get more involved with Nectar following this call. So for brands, we'd love to have you participate in future Nectar studies. So if you're interested in having your product tested, we'll be sending a sign-up form in the follow-up email as well, where you can drop your contact information and we'll be in touch. For retailers, food service operators, investors, or potential other partners, we'd love to schedule a call with you to discuss how Nectar's data can help you make more sensory-informed decisions. So we'll be sending out our contact information after the call and would love to schedule some conversations. And then if you're a researcher or an academic, we'd love to discuss how you can use Nectar's data sets to answer novel research questions. We're already working with some researchers that are looking at how to use sensory data to do predictive analytics and modeling to try to understand what taste outcomes will resonate with consumers by looking at things like ingredient lists. So if that's you, definitely reach out. We'd love to share our data. And lastly, we'd love to have you sign up for our email list. We're just getting started. As I mentioned, we just launched in June. So we have more reports, more information, and more events coming soon. And we'd love to keep you in the loop. So with that, I will just leave this here and turn it over to Emma to ask some of the questions that you guys have surfaced.
Yes, and thank you so much, Caroline, for that very insightful review of the study. I really appreciate that. We do have a variety of questions here. I'll start with some basics around the nature of the study. So we have a question here on the ages of participants in the study. Could you refresh us on the demographic distribution of the participants? I know you had a nice slide on that as well.
Let me pull that back up. Okay, so here's the demographics of the study population. They, tried to get a relatively good range of folks. You're seeing, majority of folks are sort of middle-aged here, but definitely recruited for a population between 21 and 69.
Great, thank you. We have another couple questions on methodology. This one asks if the animal product was served in a balanced design with the plant-based products, or if it was blocked in a serving position. I'm guessing this means, like, was it always first or last in terms of the ordinal series?
No, so everything was blind. So it was randomized in terms of what people tried. So they were not aware of which product was the animal product. And that's the way that we're also doing it for our in-context restaurant tests. It's people come to the restaurant, they get 4 halves of burgers, and one of those was plant-based, one of those was animal-based, and 2 of them were blended or plant-rich meat products. So everything is blind.
Thank you. And then another question asks, does this consumer data, has it been combined with sensory expert data at all, or only penalty and jars just about rights?
Yeah, so this is just data from omnivore consumers. It's not trained sensory panel data. I think that there's definitely some of that data out there, and we could look at comparing that. But we were really just trying to understand, what does the average American consumer think of these products when tasting them? So yeah, it's not a trained sensory panel, but that is an analysis that we could look at and would be interested to see how it compares.
Great, thank you. And we know the inaugural study used products available in the Chicago area. Thinking into the future, how will brands and products be selected for testing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're trying to figure that out right now. We want brands to be excited about participating. So the first study, like I said, was just products that were purchased in retail. So brands didn't know that their products were being tested, and the data was shared sort of retroactively after with them. Moving forward, we'd love to work with brands that are excited to have their products testing. So we're going to be including them in the recruitment process. And then, as I said, we're going to be picking those top categories based on the top selling animal products, and then trying to find plant-based brands in each of those categories that have sort of a significant level of distribution. So we're not going to be testing like benchtop products or products that are not really in the market yet. So really looking for products that have significant distribution and that like could be sourced by retailers or food service operators. I think we're also going to be focused on US-based and European-based brands for this initial test of Taste of the Industry 2025, but we are looking at doing a specific sensory panel in the Asian Pacific region as well, just because the product formats there are quite different, as well as the seasonings and flavors to accommodate sort of those regional tastes. So more information shortly, and we will be publishing our framework for how we're selecting each of those brands in each category, but still a little bit a work in progress. So if other people have thoughts on how we can do that to improve data integrity, would love their feedback as well.
Thank you. So we also have a question about the blended meat company ecosystem, and the question asker was curious about the number of current blended meat companies known. And I will plug really quickly the GFI alt protein company database, which has all of the GFI known companies across different pillar types. But perhaps you could also highlight and give us a sense of the approximate number of products and brands that are going to be included in your upcoming plant-rich study that would, I think, be similar.
Yeah, for sure. And we use the GFI alt protein database on a daily basis over here. So huge fans of that tool. We surveyed, like we kind of took a broad approach at trying to find blended product companies and found about 45, I would say, that are marketing their products as blended products. Since we finished the data collection, we found out that in countries like Japan, there's potentially hundreds or thousands of companies that are producing blended products, but may not be marketing it under that name. So we're really focused on companies that are leaning into that and speaking about the benefits of including meat and vegetables in the products. We did struggle a little bit with sourcing because some of these are small startups and they just didn't have product available. Also, shipping product that has real animal product in it can be a challenge. So we ended up with about 22 companies that are in the study. But like I said, that is across 9 categories of product, and that spans beef, pork, and chicken products that will be covered.
Thank you. And there are other questions about potential future versions of the study. Are there plans to do a similar study on dairy alternatives? Are there plans to do studies on cultivated meat in that category in the future?
Yeah, so we have tested a few cultivated products, but as they become more and more widely available, I think we are definitely interested in doing that further. And yes, definitely category expansion. I think we want to start with the categories that need what from our perspective, need the most help from taste perspective. So that's why we're starting with plant-based meat. We think a lot of the dairy alternatives in plant-based milks have kind of achieved that or have more wider adoption. But things like plant-based cheese, plant-based seafood, those are definitely on our radar for future testing. So again, would love to hear feedback from the ecosystem. So if there's different specific categories that people are really interested in getting insights into, share that. We would love to hear your feedback on where we should focus efforts.
And there was a question about the existence of any available data or plans to collect data that would benchmark omnivores' preferences against vegan or vegetarians' preferences. So maybe you could talk a little bit to your approach and why you all chose omnivores.
Yeah. So again, I was not at FSI when this study was designed, so we're doing things a little bit differently for the next test. But for this first test, they included some products that it turns out after talking to the brands are really developed only for vegans and vegetarians. And I think that potentially contributed to some of these lower category averages because they weren't trying to go after omnivore consumers and be plant-based meat analogs. So for all of our testing moving forward, we are screening to make sure that the companies really are trying to create meat analogs, and that the goal is to convert a certain percentage of omnivore consumers to those products, even if it's only a few days a week. I think the goal at FSI is really to reduce our reliance on animal agriculture and see that converting omnivores to more plant-based options is going to be essential to that strategy, which is why we're testing with that. Vegan and vegetarians, unfortunately, are just such a small percentage of the market still. So we're hoping that if we can, achieve taste parity with animal-based products or exceed it, that we'll be able to convert some of those omnivore consumers, which is why we're focusing our efforts there. I think there are definitely some sensory tests that have been done with vegan and vegetarians. So if folks have those data sets, it would be interesting to compare how the products resonate. And I think there's also things where some vegans and vegetarians actually don't want products that taste incredibly like meat because they're looking for something that might be more like bean-based or like plant-based ingredients.
Thank you. That makes sense. So we had a question here about other global regions. This study was conducted in the US, but do you anticipate that Nectar would conduct future studies in other global regions? Would you consider testing products available in other global regions with US consumers as well?
Yeah, so we've been thinking a lot about this. I think originally we were thinking about using the American omnivore consumers and sort of shipping international products here, but we also know that a lot of these products are designed with the regional population in mind. And so something designed for the Singaporean market, for example, might not resonate with American consumers versus it might, be very popular there. So we are really interested in surfacing great tasting products globally. So we definitely want to do panels in different regions. The way that we're currently thinking about it is for this next Taste of the Industry report would be to recruit products from the US and Europe and then do a separate panel in the Asian Pacific region. But again, we're still trying to work through some of the specifics there because even within that region, there's a lot of nuance between products designed for Chinese consumers versus products designed for Indian consumers or, all of the different amazing cultural groups that are there. So I'm trying to work through that, but it is on our roadmap to try to surface the best technologies and ingredients that are leading to great tasting products wherever they are.
Thank you. There's a question here about mushrooms. I did want to just sort of ask for clarity. Did you include any biomass products in your study, or was it purely the plant kingdom?
Yes, so this test was purely the plant kingdom. I think moving forward, we are interested in testing some fungi or mycelium-based products. I think we're trying to determine if that will be just within the general Taste of the Industry report. So like, for example, will we be testing meaties products, or are we going to do a specific future of the industry report that looks at mycelium or fungi or biomass fermentation-based products? So verdict's still out there a bit, but it is on our radar to definitely include them.
This is a fun method question. I see that you have N equals 1,150 participants. How long did it take to conduct the study?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually don't know the total time. I was, yeah, like I mentioned, joined Nectar after this was conducted. I think it was about a month. I can tell you for the plant-rich meat study that we just conducted in restaurants, we kicked off testing in in May, and it didn't conclude until July. So it does take quite a bit of time to recruit omnivore consumers that eat these categories with enough frequency, and then to bring them to the restaurant location and have them try the product. So it's not a small endeavor to do these large scale tests.
Thank you. There's a question here on nutritional value, particularly about fat to protein ratios. And I guess I'll reinterpret this question a bit and ask, given that you have data on hand for the liking of these products, have you all considered doing additional analysis that would, potentially correlate liking with the fat to protein ratio or fat content of different plant-based products to sort of explore if there are important findings on incorporation of fat and other types of ingredients or ingredient types and how that influences liking?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for this study, we didn't publish ingredient lists or call out specific ingredients because it's really important to us to maintain brand and anonymity. And it's pretty easy to map ingredient lists to products. So we are working with some researchers, as I mentioned, to do some of this analysis, mainly looking at ingredients and trying to figure out, can you predict sensory outcomes and liking scores from those ingredient lists? We haven't specifically looked at fat to protein ratios, but that's a great suggestion, and I would love to dive into that and understand a bit more how that affects outcomes. But for the plant-rich meat study, we're also going to be doing some analysis to understand blending with X leads to better taste outcomes. So hopefully we'll have some insights of like which ingredients are really resonating with consumers. And just for a teaser there, it seems to be sort of these premium whole plant-based ingredients. So things like caramelized onions, shiitake mushrooms, broccoli, things that really have a lot of flavor on their own can bring up the flavor profile of those plant-rich products.
Thank you. There's a couple questions here on other similar studies for other plant-based products. Maybe that's in the plant-based meat category or in other plant-based food categories. But definitely curious if you all found very helpful precedent sensory studies that influenced your design. I know that you weren't part of the kickoff here, but are there studies that you found useful today or looking forward to the plant-rich study as well that you would recommend others read up on?
Yeah, I think why we felt there was a need for Nectar to do this work was that there wasn't sort of a, go-to resource for taste. There's a lot, individual brands do sensory testing on their own, but we've heard from a lot of folks like investors or, food service operators that it's hard to trust those results without them being third-party verified. So I'm not familiar with a large resource that looks at taste, which is why we really wanted to start doing this and why FSI kind of started small back in 2019 and then decided, okay, actually there's some legs here for us to invest further on trying to create this objective evidence base for taste. But there's definitely some work being done as well with sort of neurosensory testing and being able to understand how people taste in their brain chemistry when they taste different products. So we've been chatting with the company Thymus as well to see if there's interest to overlap this sensory data with their testing. But yeah, if there are other resources that folks are aware of, we'll definitely love to hear about them. We're just not familiar.
Thank you. I know one of the things that we also wanted to cover is if there's a cost for brands to participate in future studies as they reach out to you.
Yeah, so right now, Nectar is a purely altruistic endeavor. We really want to see the alternative protein category succeed, and we think that taste is super important to that. So we're not charging brands to participate, but we are kind of offering different packages of data. So if a brand participates, we'll give them their overall liking scores and how they compare to the animal-based benchmark as well as the plant-based leader for their category. And then we're offering 2 different tiers of data for them if they want to sort of get a really deep dive on which specific attributes are contributing to positive or negative liking. If they don't choose to opt into that, they will still have access to the full public report, which is the sort of category level insights, and their product would definitely be part of that. But we hope that brands will take advantage of this and that we're able to offer this really rich sensory data at a much reduced price that then they would be able to get it themselves for conducting sensory testing with this many participants.
There's a quick question here on, can non-US companies participate in future studies?
Yes, yep, definitely would love that. So we have a number of non-US companies that were participating in the plant-rich meats report. Like I said, I think our goal is going to be to focus for the Taste of the Industry 2025 on European, Middle East, and US based companies, and then to do a separate recruitment for our Asia Pacific region brands. But yes, definitely get in touch. We would love to include people all over the globe.
Thank you. And could you talk a little bit about into the future how you will select study participants as well?
Yeah, so right now we're conducting these, we're working with Palette Insights, which I know supports a number of brands in the space, and they have hubs in New York and San Francisco. So we're currently working with them and their restaurant partners in those 2 cities to recruit omnivore consumers. The consumers have to fill out screener questions that verify that they are omnivores, so that they eat animal protein with relative frequency, and that they eat the product category that they're going to come to test with enough frequency. So I think it's like, for example, with meatballs, you have to eat meatballs at least every 1 to 2 months in order to be included in testing a meatball, because we don't want people to come in if they never eat that category. And yeah, we're going to try to optimize again for ethnicities, ages, income levels, and even gender split. And each product is being tested by more than 100 omnivores for recruitment.
And we have a specific question about the sausage category here. Would sausage be considered as a potential future category in one of your studies?
Yeah, yep. So it is included. Pork sausage and chicken sausage are included in the plant-rich meat study. And then we are definitely planning to test like bratwurst or like that kind of sausage in the next Taste of the Industry report. So, and then also breakfast sausage, which is a different category, probably the patty-based version of that versus the links. But yes, sausage is top of mind.
All right, thank you. I think we will leave it there so that folks have time before their next top of the hour meeting. Anything else you wanted to emphasize, Caroline?
No, just say like we are still in the experimentation phase of getting Nectar off the ground. So we definitely mean it when we say, please share your feedback liberally with us. We want this data to be super helpful to brands and different stakeholders who are looking to make sensory informed decisions. So if we can improve anything to make that more helpful to you, please reach out and share your feedback. This is my contact information, and yeah, you can find the full report on our website, and we'll also be sending it out in the follow-up email for those who want to take a closer look.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Really appreciate you joining us today. Appreciate the report. Looking forward to the next one. And to reiterate, we will be sending out the recording and the deck Thank you all for participating and for your questions, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks so much.